much for joining us this evening. Um, I'm Rachel. I work at Memorial Church. I am the Multi-Faith Engagement Fellow there, and I'm really excited to be working on this Sustaining Practices series. This is our last session of the semester, so we're really glad that you all joined. This series features chaplains from around Harvard and other members of the Harvard community offering insights into their personal, diverse, multimodal spiritual practices that have sustained them and given them hope and energy and courage throughout these difficult times. And it's been really wonderful every week to hear from different members of the Harvard community. Really excitingly, we have the recordings of all the sessions, which will be shared very soon. But we're so excited, like I said, for our final session of the semester tonight. I'm gonna pass it over to Rabbi Jen Queen to share a little bit more about the themes and the presenters for this week.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Hey, all. I'm Rabbi Jen. I'm the Director of Engagement and Reform Rabbi at Harvard Hillel, and one of the Jewish chaplains in the beautiful chaplains network that we have at Harvard. I'm thrilled that we are joined tonight by Stephanie Paulsell, the interim PUC minister at Memorial Church on Harvard's campus, and David Heckendorn, one of the intervarsity chaplains, who works primarily with the graduate student community. And Stephanie and David, whereas we've been trying to focus on one theme each week, we're presenting kind of a dual theme this week between Stephanie's and David's presentations. And they'll tell you much, much more. But we're kind of looking at this on one hand, at first with Stephanie's presentation, an opportunity for creation. And then kind of on the other side of that, David's practice of Sabbath, of rest, the stopping of creation and movement and doing, to pause and be. So this is a beautifully balanced presentation that we have tonight by my esteemed colleagues. And I am thrilled to pass it off to Stephanie. And I'll be dropping both Stephanie's and David's resources in the chat, but they'll be screen sharing in the meantime. So no need to click it now, just for your information later. Stephanie, take it away.
Great, thank you. It's great to see everyone. And I'm so grateful to Rachel and Jen for the invitation to be here. And to David, I'm looking forward so much to learning from him this evening. My practice is the creation of prayer books, homemade prayer books. And how I became interested in this, when I was a kid, and actually, I don't know why I always locate this in my childhood, but still today, my father's sort of core spiritual practice is to read 6 Psalms a day. And when I was a kid, he taught at a college that had as its mascot a very fierce looking bulldog with like a spiky collar around his neck. It was the team mascot. And my dad had all these notebooks with that bulldog on the cover. And underneath the bulldog, he wrote Lectio Divina, which is Latin for prayerful reading, which is an old religious practice that, in many religious traditions of reading closely, deeply, as a way to open space to draw near to God. And so I grew up watching my father write in these notebooks. What he does is he reads 6 Psalms a day, and he just listens for the verse that speaks to him in that moment. And so he's got all these notebooks with 6 verses, various verses from various Psalms over and over and over again. And when I became a graduate student, I found out there was actually a word for that. It's called a florilegium, which literally means a gathering of flowers, like a flower garden. And it's what, medieval monks would do. They would just jot down bits and pieces of their reading, and they would create these new texts. And so I came to see my father as writing these new Psalms with verses from the Psalms, but set next to each other in different combinations on every page. And so they would come to mean something different because they would be rubbing up against each other. When my father was a doctoral student in religion, he he went to Vanderbilt Divinity School, and he had a teacher who would take them to the Abbey of Gethsemane, which is a Trappist monastery in Kentucky, where at the time there was a very famous monk named Thomas Merton living. He was a writer and an activist, and he would meet with these students, and my dad got very excited about this. I come from a very sort of a low church Protestant tradition. And my father had never seen anything like this monastery. It was amazing to him. And so this was his sort of way of accessing, I think, monastic spirituality, because the monks go in the church 7 times a day and they pray the Psalms. And when my father became a college teacher, he would take his students to the Abbey of Gethsemane and have them experience it. And our family would often go. And so I grew up, and one of the monks came to North Carolina where we lived and started an experimental monastery in the woods, basically in Oxford, North Carolina. So we would go there a lot, and they prayed in a barn, and they would just, every service they would go in and they would just start reading through the Psalms. So I think because of this, I grew up very attracted to the materiality of the notebooks, and the writing things down, and the psalters and all of that. And so I've had a little practice I've been interested in prayer books, and I've tried to make a few prayer books. And I have this fantasy prayer book in my mind that I'm constantly collecting things for, that one day I want to make with all my favorite stuff in it. But anyway, I'm going to share my screen and show you. So homemade prayer books. This is a florilegium. This is what I think my father is making in his notebooks by writing down bits and pieces of the Psalms. But this is a very beautiful medieval florilegium. You can see there's some artist has made it, and it's full of amazing illustrations and little excerpts from whoever made it from their reading. So that's a tiny little florilegium. This is my florilegium, and I just wanted you to see it so you would know they don't have to be so fancy. I'm not an artist myself. Any images I put in my prayer books, I have to clip out of Christmas cards and things like that. But anyway, this has everything from Thomas Merton's journal to the writings of Oscar Romero to the Gospel of Matthew to this great novel by Valeria Luiselli called Lost Children Archive, which if you haven't read, you should read. And a quotation from Rumi that I came across in a final paper of one of my students. But I write the date. I just have this sort of ongoing florilegium, and I just read through it periodically. And I've been typing it up recently because my handwriting's so terrible. But I write it first in this notebook, and then I go through and type it up so that I can read it again, and listen for the ways the texts sound differently next to these other texts, which I think for me is kind of a central religious practice, because I think what else is religion but a florilegium, right? What is any religion but a florilegium of, scriptures and hymns and people's experiences and various traditions kind of cobbled together and made into something. This is a medieval prayer book. The most popular kind of book in the late Middle Ages was called the Book of Hours. And around 1200, people who were not monks began to want these books so that they could have a little bit of monastic spirituality in their ordinary lives. And I think, in thinking about our practices for perilous times, I think maybe one of the contributions of this is to orient us in time. Especially at the beginning of this pandemic, I felt so scattered in time, and kind of like a baby, like not able to tell day from night. And we're just all sitting in our houses, in our rooms, and so I think the kind of prayer that lay people were after, like my dad, what he loved when he visited the monastery and wanted to sort of bring home with him in the form of a book, is this idea of praying at fixed times during the day, which is, and I think all of our religious traditions has this practice in some form or another of praying in the morning, praying at night, praying at noon, praying at various times, and helping us orient ourselves toward time. This little book, this Book of Hours, right here at the top, it says Incipit Officium, which means this is where the office begins, the divine office, which is the round of daily prayer that this book kind of leads you through. This is my current prayer book, which is one page in a plastic sleeve. And it has an opening that the monks sing in the monastery, and I know the tune they sing it to, and I can hear it in my mind, so I put it in because I love it. But what I'm trying, basically it's set up so that I can try to just read my way through the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the Psalms, and the New Testament. And of course, often in the morning, there's not enough time to read a chapter from each of these, so I often have to just choose one. But it just has some of my favorite things in it, my favorite Psalms, and it's very simple, as you can see, and easy to create with bits of text that you love. But the best prayer book I ever made was for my daughter while she was in college. I think it was her first Christmas home from college. I made her this prayer book. And I took a few pictures of it to share with you. My first bit of text came from Chance the Rapper, and I was trying to remember where I got this from. I think I took it off of Twitter, but when the praises go up, the blessings come down. My daughter loves Chance the Rapper, and did in 2016, and so this was the first page of the prayer book that I made for her. And then we had been in Rome together for a year, and so I wanted to put in images of things that we had shared together. So this is the ceiling of my favorite church in the world, which is Santa Maria in Trastevere. It's these figures, it's Mary and Jesus, and they're huge and they're up. You can see like their toes are really long and they're up in the ceiling. It's a mosaic and it's really shiny and beautiful. It's old, it's Byzantine, it's really lovely. But I paired it with this prayer from Mechtild of Magdeburg. O burning mountain, O chosen sun, O perfect moon, O fathomless well. It feels like a florilegium itself of images that she uses to think of God, wisdom without end, mercy without limit. And then I did a prayer for every morning and evening of every day, so 14 prayers. And so one of them I put in was a poem by Emily Dickinson. You may know, I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, more numerous of windows, superior for doors, of chambers as the cedars, impregnable of eye, and for an everlasting roof, the gambrels of the sky, of visitors the fairest, for occupation this, the spreading wide my narrow hands to gather paradise. I love that. I love this whole poem, but I love the sky being the roof. Emily Dickinson didn't go to church. She went out, she stayed in her garden and sat outside, and her cathedral ceiling was the sky. It reminds me of a bit in Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, where she talks about busting through the cathedral ceiling to see the stars overhead. And then the other page was an antiphon, a little prayer from the monks from the Abbey of Gethsemane, which is a really beautiful chant of kind of a lullaby. Guard us while we're sleeping. And then this image I love because it's Mary nursing her baby, and my daughter and I did a lot of nursing together, first years of her life, and a little bit from Psalm 141, the evening prayer, let my prayer rise up like incense before you. And then it ended with Virginia Woolf. And this to me is the best description of a florilegium that I have ever heard. It's being thought by a painter named Lily Briscoe. She's thinking about the vocation of the artist. And she says, love had 1,000 shapes. There might be lovers whose gift it was to choose out the elements of things and place them together, and so giving them a wholeness not theirs in life, make of some scene or meeting of people, all now gone and separate, one of those globed, compacted things over which thought lingers and love plays. So I think the globed, compacted thing over which thought lingers and love plays could be your prayer book. That is made up of, disparate elements of things, and giving them a new wholeness by placing them together. So I share these images with you simply as a way to inspire you, perhaps, to create your own book of prayers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful, and I feel inspired now. I love the idea that you made a prayer book for your daughter. That's so beautiful. We'll pass it over now to
Hello, I am David Heckendorn, and I work with InterVarsity's campus ministry with international graduate students and postdocs. And my wife and I are also resident directors in a house for international students that's owned by Park Street Church, that's just north of Harvard Law School. So I'm going to talk about Sabbath. Stephanie's shown you examples of some people's really hard work, and I'm going to talk with you about rest and my practice of rest and Sabbath. So I'll ground this in scripture. In the very beginning of the Jewish Torah, the Old Testament, in Genesis chapter 2, we read, by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. And my Christian brethren would say, well, if God was blessed by resting after all his creation, then surely it's good for us as well. That practice was codified in the Ten Commandments. So in Exodus chapter 20, we read, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So it's easy to see Sabbath as an antiquated concept. It's probably the one of the Ten Commandments that's broken most frequently. And if not, it's because it's only possible to break it once a week. But Jesus goes on and addresses the Sabbath in Matthew chapter 12 in talking about healing. He says, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, and goes on and says it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So the intent of the Sabbath is to build us up and to be a blessing to us. In Mark chapter 2, we read the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Again, Jesus speaking. And then in kind of a coda to this teaching about the Sabbath, in the letter to the Hebrews, written either by the Apostle Paul or someone else, we read, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest. The counterplay of effort and rest maybe is deliberate there, because we do have to make an effort to rest. And I would say probably nowhere any more than here at Harvard, where we have professors or principal investigators who are expecting us to be working, maybe not 24/7, but certainly a lot more than 5 days a week and 8 hours a day. So I want to share some of my practices, and then I've invited my friend Akosia to talk about, to tell a story about what Sabbath has meant to her and how she's been blessed by practicing Sabbath. So some things that I find helpful overall is a break from routine. And there are things that I do as a part of my work throughout the week, and even on Sunday. My wife has just resigned from a position in a church up in Andover, but we've been involved in leading worship in that church and in church in Boston. We have an international fellowship that meets on Sunday afternoons. We have a house dinner and a house meeting here. And so Sunday's a pretty busy day. And so our practice is to take off on Sunday evening after our house meeting and to drive to a house that we own in Gloucester and spend Monday there off-site and come back on Tuesday morning. And we find that physical break certainly supports a change in routine. And it's useful to support a firm break. So a break from routine, something that allows us to rest and restore ourselves. If we can, then we like to practice some extended worship together, and to pray alone and together, and to practice listening prayer to see if we can hear something that God is saying to us, either through the scriptures or through his Holy Spirit. I enjoy fellowship in a way that I don't necessarily during the work week, and often together with my spouse. Depending on the season, we might have brunch together under cover or go out for a picnic. We might go to the beach or to the mountains for hiking or skiing, again, depending on the season, or go out and enjoy a garden. I wrote down lovemaking, a favorite Sabbath practice for those of us with spouses, not necessarily in conjunction with a trip to the beach or the mountains. So things that we don't do or try not to do. Try to avoid email, try to avoid writing papers or lecture preparation. And I'm proud to say, I guess, that I managed to finish drafting this talk yesterday, and so I've been able to take a break today. But trying to break from routine. This hasn't been a perfect day. I mentioned that we bought a house in Gloucester, and we're selling a house in Andover, and the purchase and sale, unfortunately, is due tomorrow. And so there have been lots of texts and emails today back and forth with a realtor and a lawyer. Not the way that I'd like to be spending a Sabbath, particularly a Sabbath leading up to a talk about how I spend my Sabbath. So kind of unfortunate. I want to hand over to Akosia, who is a doctoral student at the Chan School, and who I've enjoyed ministering with this autumn, and from whom I've learned a lot. I asked her if she would tell a story about her Sabbath practice.
So thank you so much, David, for this reminder to enter into the rest of God. And I also appreciate very much the invitation to share my Sabbath story. And thank you, Stephanie, for your beautiful prayer presentation. I'm grateful for the distinguished chaplains and Harvard community on this platform. So for my Sabbath, I would typically block out my weekends and focus on resting and spending quality time with my family, and also engaging in church activities. And this has kept me very grounded, and it's a way for me to escape from work and school and everything else going on around me to just rejuvenate. And I'll typically block out Saturday evening until Sunday evening for my Sabbath. So for my Sabbath story, one of those Sabbaths, I had a final exam due before midnight. You know, right now is the final exam season. So this was last year. And I had a final exam due before midnight on Sunday. So you can imagine the temptation to study during my Sabbath. You know, after all, Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath and all of that. But having been taking final exams the previous week and studying and all that comes along with it, I was very mentally exhausted. Plus, I wasn't sure how to answer a whole section on this final exam that was due Sunday midnight. And So here was Sabbath. So do I obey, have faith in God and obey, or just push through? So I decided to obey and trust the Lord to deliver by Sunday evening when I would usually break my Sabbath. After church that Sunday, I was still exhausted and I just wanted to start working on my exam. And then I hear the Holy Spirit whispering, and the Lord, encouraged me to just rest. After all, it's my Sabbath, and I should trust Him. So I went to sleep, and I woke up at about 10 p.m. Having finished my exam, I wasn't sure what to do with one particular section. It was due at midnight, by midnight. So when I woke up, I was like, wow, I slept. Then I said a simple prayer, a very simple prayer. I remember that on my bed when I woke up, and I said, Lord, show me what to do. And then immediately, I got this answer in my head, and a document that I should just read and I'll know what to do. So I pushed through and submitted my work before midnight. And guess what? I received a perfect score on my exam, and of course, an A. So that is, whenever I'm tempted to do work, I remember this testimony, and I just trust in the Lord to just pull through for me. So that's my little Sabbath story.
Thank you, Kosia. That was very meaningful for me. And I'll just end by saying the idea of taking a whole day off out of your busy week may seem daunting. So I would encourage you to think about starting with half a day or a couple of hours. So think about what you can commit and practice some of these things in the context of that period. Take a Sunday morning or a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday morning, but set that aside and decide that's going to be your rest and restoration time. Certainly, I would encourage you to think about looking at scripture or praying, but go for a walk in the woods or spend the time in a garden. And if you can expand that time, so much the better. But start small and work toward whatever your goal is. Thank you, Rachel. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the beautiful presentations and stories and inspiration from all of your personal lives. I'll hand it over to Jen to close us out.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And thank you again to Stephanie and David and Akosia for being here this week and for sharing their personal practices. It occurred to me as y'all were both speaking that these spiritual practices are so incredibly personal and close to home and beautifully DIY, do it yourself. You don't need any special tools or materials. It's, pulling from that which speaks to your heart and your soul and your mind, doing that which our hearts and souls and minds so deeply need, which is resting every once in a while. As Akosia's story so beautifully demonstrated, right? We all need to hit pause in order to be able to fully deliver in the world and show up as our fullest selves. And so thank you again so much for taking the time and for sharing so deeply with us. And again, thank you so much to Rachel for being my partner in practice over the last 6 weeks and helping to organize this series for us. And thank you all so much for being here, for showing up, whether you came this week, you came every week, or you bounced around a bit. We're so thrilled to have y'all and to practice with you and to learn with you. And stay tuned for what's coming next. Happy Hanukkah. Tonight is candle number 5. And for everyone else, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. Hope you all have a beautiful, restful, restorative winter break. Stay well, everybody.